Shalom. In this week's parsha, Kitisa, we have the story of the golden calf and the very dramatic incidents that follow, including Moses' attempt to intercede on behalf of the Jewish people who are under threat of destruction because of the divine anger. And as one of the pivotal, maybe the pivotal point in this exchange, dialogue, if you wish, between Moses and God, when God says, I'm going to will destroy the Jewish people and build a new people out of you, Moses says, no, that's not at all acceptable. And then he says, Mecheni nami sifracha shekatavta, erase me from your book. That is to say, if you're going to destroy the Jewish people, then destroy me as well. And this is considered by most of the interpreters in the Jewish tradition to be the ultimate in leadership, the ultimate in self-sacrifice on behalf of one's people. The proverbial captain going down with his ship. Moses says, if you're going to destroy the Jewish people, then destroy me too. But there's another way of looking at this. Mecheni na does not necessarily mean, kill me, I want to die. It's not necessarily self-sacrifice. It can also mean a self-effacement. I want to be effaced. Now, what's the difference between that? Self-effacement does not involve the physical death or destruction of the person. It does involve, however, removing all of the external packaging and all of the internal urges and prejudices and likes and dislikes and so on that we all carry with us. All of this baggage is, from the point of view of religious experience, considered to be interference, veils, garments, blockages between the human supplicant and the divine. The more we can free ourselves of these things, which interfere with our thought processes, with our ability to muster all of our spiritual energies and so on, the closer we can come to God, and the better chance of having a direct experience and successful prayer, whatever that may be. And I think that Moses' statement, Becheni na, should be understood as a plea in that direction, and I will say specifically what it is at the end of this video. But first, just to show what I mean and how this fits into a somewhat broader context of Jewish or particularly Hasidic thought, I would like to share with you one passage connected to this idea and connected to this whole story here in the book of Exodus of Shemot, which illustrates it. So here is a passage that sort of hints in the direction that I'm speaking of. It's not precisely the idea, and I'm not saying that Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, from whom I'm quoting, had anything like the idea I'm speaking of. But to the point, in the preceding parsha, last week's parsha, Vatat Tzaveh, everyone pays attention and notes the fact that the name of Moses does not appear in the entire parsha. And of course the question is why? And Rabbi Levi Berditchev in his Kedushat Levi says that the reason why is that Moses was going to prepare the priestly garments, here the literal garments, not the metaphorical garments I spoke of that interfere with our communication with the divine, but there may be some connection here. Anyway, he says V'haya Moshe batel b'mtziut kedei la'asig hakavanot shel asiyat b'gdei kahuna. Ukshadam batel b'mtziut ena nekra shemo alav. Moses was basically nullified. His existence was nullified so that he could get the proper intentions when making these garments. And when someone is nullified to that extent, that person has no name, and so Moses' name doesn't appear in the parsha. Now, I'm speaking of something similar, but I want to just emphasize now that this nullification leaves a certain skeleton, when we call it skeleton self, certain core personality, because whether you're speaking of someone who's trying to get the proper intentions for making priestly garments, or whether someone's trying to pray, there has to be something left behind after we've cast off all of these things that are so much a part of our daily personality, so that that can carry on this dialogue. So it's not total annulment, but it is effacing all of the exterior packaging and interior rumblings and bodily urges and passions that interfere with it. And this is what I'm talking about. And now I'll come back and try and connect it to the parsha of Kitisa, but first make one more further point. Now, the additional point I want to make is take us into an even wider context. As some of you, I'm sure, know, certainly those who have some involvement in academic study of Judaism and Hasidism and Kabbalah, there's a great interest in comparing some of the descriptions of spiritual states and spiritual practices between Judaism and other religions, including those like Islam, which are very closely related, both historically in terms of drawing on similar sources. Islam basically springing out of a Jewish tradition, and also having interacted in the course of many centuries and had many mutual borrowings. And in this context, the idea of someone wishing a state of self-sacrifice or self-effacement as a important spiritual goal is recognized, particularly in the Sufi tradition, and has a technical term called fana, which is known to many of the people who study this, that is said to describe the state. But fana really means death, and that's how it's used in Judeo-Arabic literature. And I said that I'm thinking here of self-effacement, which is not self-sacrifice in that sense. Interestingly enough, there is a different term in Sufism, which is far less known, and I never seen it cited in the context of comparing between Jewish and Islamic spiritual experiences, called mahw. And mahw comes from exactly the same root, a cognate of the Hebrew root from the mechenina, that is the focus of my talk today. So we have the same root in Arabic, mim, ha, wa, in Hebrew, mem, chat, vav, and it means it's the same root exactly, and it has the same meaning of erasing, of wiping away, but not the type of ultimate self-destruction or self-sacrifice. Here is a description of mahw that I've pulled off the internet from one of the Sufi sources. I think it's very, very excellent and to the point. He says effacement, mahw, is distinct from obliteration, because in obliteration, the person's very being is annihilated within the divine essence. But effacement is the removal of the attributes of habit. But the entity itself remains, because it's only through one's entity that one has knowledge of God. And here it is, the entity must remain, because the entity, the core entity, is praying to God. But it is effacing all of the integuments, the garments, the veils, the packaging, the exterior layers, interior rumblings that interfere with this. So we have here, actually, unbeknownst to the Hasidic people who spoke about hitbatlut, or many of the academic scholars who are studying these correspondences, a direct philological as well as phenomenological correspondence between the state that I associate with Mechanina and a state in the Sufi tradition. So let me try and tie all of this together in a minute or so. I interpret Moses' request, Mechanina, as a request for divine help in his attempt at self-effacement. Moses wanted to achieve this state of self-effacement, of removing, as I said, all the bodily characteristics, the couperements, baggage that interfere with the divine, with the direct experience of the divine, much in the way that to achieve the state such as that described by Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Meberditchev. But sometimes we need divine help to help us get our prayers across. Moses, as I'm saying, was requesting this help so he could pray on behalf of the Jewish people and save them from destruction. And we pray for God's help to help us pray before we begin the prayer. The daily prayers of the Jews begin, Hashem Svatai Tiftach, God, please open my lips. We are one of the most moving prayers on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We say, Ladam Archelev Umei Hashem Ma'aneh Lashon. Our hearts can sort of get to the right ideas that we want to express, but only God can help us actually get the expressions out, get the words out. So in a similar vein, Moses was saying, Mechanina, help me to achieve self-effacement. Efface me so that I can have direct access as much as is possible for a human being to the Kisei HaKavod, to the divine throne, and then in that sense have the best chance of having a successful prayer on behalf of the Jewish people. So I hope you found this insight interesting. I think it's original, and I'd be happy to hear what you have to say in the comments. If you like to subscribe, but don't ring the bell. Thanks a lot. Shabbat Shalom.